Hello, my name is Alain Parizeau. I'm a director at Public Works, and I'll be walking you through the questions in this brand articulation framework questionnaire. We'll be unpacking some of the ways to answer the questions and what the answers will be used for. So at the beginning, you want to just put in your email and your name, as well as the name of the project and your role. We do this because sometimes uh, groups fill out this form. We recommend that it's done individually so as to identify key points in a general idea, particularly when you're dealing with a group project. We also like to know the role because sometimes there's hierarchy. In other words, there might be a founder or a director that's involved with some consultants and some friends and family that know a lot about the business. So it's good to know who the consultants are, who are the outsiders, or who are the friends and families, and who are the founders, particularly when it comes to a personal brand where the founder or the person may have veto powers over the other group. So it helps us understand the hierarchy of answers. Next is there's an opportunity here to put in any information that maybe wasn't thought of or identified in the brief or in the initial call. This is really good in terms of any thoughts that you may have had or um, personal biases and preferences. For example, if you're a designer or work with a design team and you're trying to avoid certain words, anything that maybe you may want to use or may not want to use, this is a good place to mention it. This question over here is intended to identify who's going to be using this BAF, and that helps us understand whether or not this brand articulation framework is going to be used to speak to an audience, in other words, your customers or your clients, or is it going to be used to speak to your staff as onboarding? The next one is a quite crucial question. This indicates whether or not this is a personal brand or a corporate brand, or in other words, is this a story that represents a group of people, or is this a story that represents one person? So the questionnaire is split into different sections. There's the identity, the personality, and then the target audience. So this first section is talking about the identity. And the way we do this is that we personify your business or your project. And we do that by identifying what the identity of the business is, what the personality of the business is, and who the target audience is. And we do that so we can draw parallels and also identify affinities that your business shares with the target audience. So try and think of these questions in terms of a person, a fictitious person that could represent and would have the persona of your business. So first we'll start with identity. So how old would this brand or this business consider themselves to be in relation to the world? So this doesn't necessarily have to connect to how many years your business has been operating or when you registered the business. This is really in terms of the world, in relation to the world. Is it a young business? Is it middle age, or is it senior or ageless? So an ageless or timeless brand or business story or project would have attributes that tend to always be relevant. Whereas a young business or a business that is perceived to be young will have a tendency to be perceived as being either disruptive or innovative or just energetic, new. So it starts to identify by thinking about whether or not this is a new business, a young business, or this is a senior business. It automatically starts suggesting attributes that people may associate with it. For example, if you're a hotel or business that relies on providing a service that's trusted, usually businesses will identify themselves as being a senior. In other words, that we are experienced. We've been doing this for a long time. Whereas if you were a new business taking advantage of an opportunity and providing a new service, you would be a young business. The next question is to start also identifying attributes. So we ask, is this person, if you, in this fictitious representation of your business, does it have feminine attributes, masculine attributes, or is it mostly non-binary? Now we're not necessarily talking about gender here. We're really talking about sort of female, male energy, whereas a masculine persona or identity would be a lot more rigid, structured, sturdy, whereas a feminine persona identity would be a lot more flowing, fluid, energetic. So there's different attributes. Whereas if none of these seem to fit when you're thinking about your business and how it operates and how it's known, you can indicate non-binary. The next question is, does this person or business have an origins? This is really helpful in terms of developing a business story and as well as an identity. Is where does this business come from? Now, this can either be the inception or the idea that inspired you to start this business or this project, but it could also be geographic. In other words, that your business comes from Sri Lanka or your business comes from Canada. And if you are being geographic in this case, try and be as specific as possible. In other words, rural, urban, is it from the city? Is it from a farm? And you can even get into specifics as to identifying the fauna or a particular place, a city, a name of a place. The next question is considering your team, your business team or your project team, or the way your business approaches learning and experiences. This is more about in terms of how your business has gone about becoming. Is it by trial and error, or are everyone specialists in this? And if they're specialists, how did they become specialized? So try and identify the descriptive term here that best suits your business. Identify a classification that best fits the size of the group. I think that's the size. In other words, is this a big team, a small team? Next is tone of voice. Try and think about how the business sounds when it's speaking, or this person, this fictitious person. Does it sound local or foreign to your target audience, or does it reflect the speech and language of a particular region or culture? If you picked a geographic location in where the business comes from, you might want to think also about what are some of the characteristics of the language of that place. Next is identify the desired level of conversation of this persona, of this fictitious person. Next is identifying the level of formality and the way in which it speaks to the target audience. This will be in terms of visual language and written language. Usually these are similar, but they could be different. Next, we're going to go into the personality. So this really starts identifying syntax, style, both visually and written. So if the identity of your business or the project is sort of where it comes from and the group of people that this fictitious person is part of, the personality is how it speaks, how it separates itself within that group. So let's get into it. Connections. Where would you place your business in terms of how it pursues its connections? Is it often reserved in how it connects with the audience, or does it tend to be energetic? For example, in terms of social media and posting, energetic would be where it's posts a lot, whereas reserved might be a little bit more quiet, doesn't engage as much. It's a little bit more of a quiet business. In other words, it doesn't like to constantly be in your face. The next is structure. So identify how diverse your business gets in its work. Does its offer tend to remain consistent, or does it tend to evolve in a surprising manner? So this is in terms, again, if we're going to use the social media example, if you're posting, do you post the same thing regularly? Do you have a slogan and you tend to use the same slogan, and you have that reputation? You're kind of reminding people of how you can be counted on for that thing, that service or that product. Whereas surprising would be where it's constantly changing. Next is when it comes to exploring ideas or experiences, how would you place your business? Is it usually a somewhat cautious persona that carefully considers new ideas and experiences, or does it tend to be a very curious one that readily embraces newness? So think about your project or your business and ask yourself which one best suits what you're doing. Next is we're going to look at more legacy. Conscientiousness is connected to a person's degree of organization and goal direction behavior. Is this person usually, and when I mean the persona of your business or your project, is it usually firm about the reputation it wants to build and the legacy that it wants to leave behind? Or does it tend to be more easygoing? So what that means is that does your business like to have everything figured out, have a plan, and then execute it? Or does it allow itself to live its questions, as we say at Public Works? For example, at Public Works, we didn't do a brand articulation framework until about 3 or 4 years of running the business. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to. We didn't want to figure out what our story was until we had lived it a little bit. Now we had the luxury of doing that. Some businesses, though, they need to hit the ground running. They need to enter a market, and they need to right away create a reputation. They need to establish themselves in that market and tell people who they are and what they're doing. So that has a tendency to have a lot more of a firm approach. Now it doesn't mean that you can't do this, enter a market and launch in an easygoing manner. What it means is that you're either deciding to allow the story to evolve and change over time as the business develops. For example, startups, like bootstrap projects and startups have a tendency to be a lot more easygoing because as they're problem solving, they're realizing how to improve their business according to the markets. They're either doing product development and adapting as they go along, or they're learning about their clientele or their customer base and adjusting their business accordingly. So it's something to think about, and it also helps us understand how to tell better stories. Are we trying to stick to that specific framework, or do we want the framework? Do we want to allow the framework to kind of shape and evolve like an idea, mutate? Next is, how do you think this person is most likely to build connections with others? So if at the beginning we were talking about the scope of how energetic versus reserved you are in terms of engagement, now we're looking at how you're going to build that connection. Is it going to be through intimacy, by paying attention and sharing? Or is it going to be through playfulness, joy, and humor? Or is your business going to be connect with people by being honest, by empathy, empathizing with them, finding common ground? The following question is, how do you think this person, this fictitious person that represents your business or your project, is most likely to contribute to the world? Is it through taking charge and influencing order and success, like by being the best, being known as being the best? Or is it through service and compassion and protection? Or is it through innovation, imagination, and creative expression? Next is, how do you think this person is most likely to explore themselves and the world? So if we were looking at this question up here in terms of the scope, is it cautious or curious? When exploring themselves, and that means understanding its own business and understanding its role of that business in the world, how is this how are they most likely going to do that within that scope? Is it through intelligence, information, and insight? Or is it through being independent, true to self, unbound, this sort of transformative process? Or is it through goodness, faith, and hope? How do you think this person is most likely wants to be remembered? So this is the legacy. Do you want it to be remembered for revolutionizing the system, for being nonconformist, for bringing radical change? Or do you want it to be remembered for making the impossible happen, creating win-win solutions between customers and clients, being the catalyst? Or do you want the business or the project to be remembered for determination and bravery, always coming through? The next question is, considering your answer to the 4 questions above, which of the following goals do you think is most important to your business? Is it to connect with others, to explore the market or your business or the product? Is it to contribute, or is it to be remembered? The next section is to identify the values that are the most important to drive this project, or to help drive your staff, or even to communicate to your target audience. So go through these and try and think which one. And this is particularly helpful because what we do is we take these 3 and then we look at your target audience and the demographic that you've identified later on in this questionnaire, and we can draw parallels. And right away that gives you ideas as to how to best connect with your target audience, how to best what to leverage when you're speaking to your target audience, to tell them that your business and the values of your business have synergy with their values. So now we'll get the final section is target audience. This is all typical target audience questions. Where is your target audience from? So try and be as specific as possible. Again, you can either go in terms of culture or markets, or you can get very specific and say, are they rural, urban? Are they from a specific city or country? Try and identify it. And avoid saying things like everywhere, just because we're trying to identify specifics. We're going to try and identify specifics to demographics. So is it mostly female? Is it mostly male? Or non-gender specific? Now, you might find that, okay, you're planning on doing multiple marketing strategies or having multiple target audiences. So when you're answering this in terms of target audience, try and think about for this first 6 months, or for this first year, or for this campaign. We often encourage our clients, and when we take on new jobs or new orders with our clients, we often encourage them to complete this questionnaire again, and then we update the brand articulation framework. For us, we have a tendency to update our BAF every 6 months to a year, just because businesses, like people, change all the time, and your target audience also changes. So it's good to always be going back to these questions and answering them again and updating your framework. Type of consumer is really useful. That's the next question. Clients who order BAFs often don't know what to answer here. It's something that you can easily Google. There's a lot of information online about this. Essentially, understanding where your target audience fits within the type of consumer, but it's particularly useful for selling, is your target audience a bargain shopper? In other words, are they looking for a deal? If they're looking for a deal, you're not going to want to have long stories. You're not going to want to have a lot of facts. You're going to want to just have some specifics, and you're going to want to emphasize perhaps the USP, or the ESP, or even the price point. They're scanning. They're looking for something that is relevant to them. Whereas the researcher type of consumer has a tendency to want to find out as much information as possible. So if you would identify that your target audience is typically a researcher type consumer, right away that tells us, for example, for a website, we need to have a lot of information on the site, a lot of access to either quick links to wiki pages and other documents outside the website, or we need to have a lot of blog stories where we're giving information and more transparency. If they're a negotiator, you're going to want to have a lot of options. You're going to want to give them price options, packages. If they're loyalist, it's going to right away tell us, okay, we need to start referencing either the benefits of long-term relationships, in other words, return clientele. It tells us a little bit about how to structure a website, or even to just structure the story. It also starts telling us that what kind of stories to emphasize. Instead of telling a lot of stories that promote the products, we're going to want to tell stories that maybe talk about the origins and the backstory of the business. And you're going to want to tell more stories about who's behind the business, because people they have a relationship with the business or project. If it's on a mission, if they're on a mission type of a consumer, we know that we got to get straight to the point, no long sentences. We know that we have to have very clear and easy to access information, particularly when we're doing a website. So this is quite important. And again, if you don't have this information, it would be really good to spend some time trying to figure out what kind of consumer types you have for your clientele or target market. Location, we discussed this already. We'll just keep going. Common family situation. This is not as important, but in some cases it's helpful. In other words, it starts to tell us how distracted your target demographic could be. If we know that they're taking care of a lot of people, or they live with other people, we know that they have to consider a lot of other things when they're making a purchasing decision. So how we're telling these stories, again, particularly when we're selling something, it tells us a little bit about how to approach it, and maybe it gives us also a little bit of a sense of the room, as they say. You know, when they say read the room, you don't want to be tone deaf when you're sending messages. We had a lot of this when we were helping businesses pivot during the COVID, where there was so much going on and so much chaos. It was very difficult, and in some cases just inappropriate for businesses to be selling. So understanding the context of and mindset of your target demographic and factors, external factors that might be um, on their minds is helpful. So here, there's a lot more you can go into here, but this kind of just starts to create a little bit of a picture of where they're at in that case. Affinities, this is really good. This is if you know that they're into certain things, whether it's politics or sports or TV shows. All these kinds of things starts to suggest either topics to have for blog stories um, and ideas to unpack, but also it starts telling us a little bit also about where to put the stories. Where should the stories be live? Uh, and it also helps you with your marketing. It starts telling you a little bit more about either cross promotions or even uh, uh, collaborations and promotions, other businesses, other projects to collaborate. A bit back into some more specifics about the target audience. What are some cultural elements that your business might share? This is particularly useful when in terms of choosing stories that have to do with inspiration. We categorize uh, stories into 4 silos: backstories and origins, products and services, uh, people and community, and lifestyle and inspiration. Uh, which emotional range do you think this audience likes or responds best to? This has to do with the Indian art theory that we use for a lot of our stories. It's called the rasa, which translate from Sanskrit to flavor. So the same way we use archetypes to identify heroes and personalities to your business, we also use rasas or flavors that we try to tune the story to. And what that does is the rasa theory, or the theory of aesthetics and the flavor, means that all art forms or all things that are perceived, or stories in our case, evoke a certain emotion in people. And there's 9 identified main rasas. So they range from things like fury, anger, um, fear, to tranquility, desire, laughter. So by identifying what the emotional range that you think your target audience will respond most to, uh, it also helps us uh, style the stories in a certain way. So if we and you can tell this by looking at the kind of content that your target audience looks at or engages with on social media, but also if you know your target audience, you know that they love beautiful things, it starts telling us also about how to talk about your product. Whereas if you know that your target audience has an affinity or tends to react well to uh, memes and comedy and likes to laugh, and then you can know you could use comedy in order to tell your stories. These kinds of things we can discuss further if you need to know more about it. We have an article on our website unpacking this further that you can check out. But again, you can Google rasas, R-A-S-A, rasa aesthetic theory, to find out more about it. The last section is called the story facts, and that's kind of it's connected to the target audience and to the business identity and persona. We call story facts uh, elements that are important that need to be in all your stories. So that can either be a USP or an ESP, but it could also be particular information that we want to make sure that the target audience understands. So we've listed these in as prompts for you to think about. So for example, how would you explain the work of this business or project? So you want to really identify some keywords that that if you had to give an elevator pitch to someone about what your business or this project will do or does, what would be those key words? The next question is, what do you want others to know about the origins of your business? So going back to um, that first question where we asked you about the origins of the business, uh, this could be the way a product or service was invented or developed. But what is the specific part of that origin story that, if you had to pick one specific thing, you would want them to know? The next one is, what do you want others to know about the product or service? So what is the story fact for the either the time frames of your service or the quality of your product, or maybe even the quantities? Do you deal in large numbers, or do you deal in small numbers? The material you use, or the way you do it, the engineering, the design, the methodology, the process, these specifics you want to put in there. What do you want others to know about the people or the team that work on the project or in the business? So this includes characteristics or qualifications. So if there's particular things about who the people are that you think will help make a purchasing decision, you want to list those here. The next one is, what do you want others to know about the work or the culture and aspirations of the business? So this is basically, you can link back to the values, but think more about how you go about doing business. If you're a business that doesn't work on weekends, if we had a client who ordered a BAF, and they were a creative agency that wanted to specify that they take their work really seriously, but come 6 o'clock or come the weekend, they also take their downtime or their own creative time seriously as well, because they believe that feeds into it. So these kinds of things, they marked it down. Now, if you find it difficult to identify these, we have a worksheet that has more specific prompts that helps business owners and project stakeholders extract more of these specifics. So definitely get in touch with us if you would like to attempt that worksheet. That concludes all the questions. Definitely get in touch with us if there's anything here that you would like us to unpack. And good luck, and enjoy the process.